Travis Blackwood guided his dun gelding down the winding trail into Silver Creek, Colorado. The late September wind carried the scent of pine and the first hint of winter. At 35, Travis was leaner than when he'd left 5 years ago, his face weathered by Wyoming winters and Montana summers. His father's ranch had been sold off years ago, but Silver Creek was still home, or had been, once. The town had changed. What had been a struggling mining community when he left was now bustling with activity. The Western Silver Company had reopened the old mines, breathing economic life into Silver Creek, but changing its character. New buildings crowded the main street, and unfamiliar faces watched him pass. Travis tethered his horse outside the Lazy Dog Saloon, one of the few establishments he recognized. Inside, conversations dimmed as he entered, dusty and trail-worn. A few old-timers nodded in recognition, but most patrons miners by the look of their worn clothes and tired eyes regarded him with suspicion. "Travis Blackwood," a familiar voice called. "Thought you died somewhere in Montana." Mike Reynolds, the bartender and Travis's childhood friend, grinned broadly, sliding a whiskey across the bar. "Almost did," Travis replied, taking the drink. "Heard my sister needed help." Mike's smile faded. "Sarah's got herself in a tough spot. Her husband died in the mine collapse last month." "Mine collapse?" Travis set down his glass. "I hadn't heard. 12 men dead. Western Silver called it an accident, paid some meager compensation, and had new workers within a week." Mike leaned closer. "Sheriff Garrison made sure the investigation went quick and clean." Travis's jaw tightened at the mention of Garrison. They had history, none of it good. "Sarah refused their money," Mike continued. "Said she wanted a real investigation. Next thing, she's being charged with stealing from the company store. Facing jail time." Travis drained his whiskey. "Where is she now?" "Under house arrest. Sheriff's deputies watch her place." A commotion at the door drew their attention. 3 men entered, deputies by their badges, but looking more like hired guns. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with cold eyes, scanned the room until his gaze locked on Travis. "Well," Deputy Cole Rankin said loudly, "look what the wind blew in." Travis remained still, one hand casually near his belt. "Sheriff Garrison. We'll be interested to know you're back," Rankin continued, approaching the bar. "Might want to make your visit short, Blackwood. Town's changed. We enforce the law now." "That what you call it?" Travis asked quietly. Rankin's eyes narrowed. "Don't start trouble you can't finish, cowboy." As the deputies left, conversation slowly resumed. Mike refilled Travis's glass, shaking his head. "You always did know how to make an entrance. What happened here, Mike? Since when does Garrison run this town like his personal kingdom?" "Since Western Silver made him rich," Mike replied. "And since people got too scared to stand up to him." Travis stared into his drink, calculating. "I need to see Sarah." "They're watching her place," Mike warned. "But I know a back way." Sarah Blackwood Mitchell lived in a small house at the edge of town, nestled against the forested foothills. Even in the fading light, Travis could spot the deputy stationed across the street, smoking lazily beneath a cottonwood tree. Mike led him through a neighbor's yard and over a back fence. When Sarah opened her door to Mike's familiar knock, her eyes widened at the sight of her brother. "Travis," she whispered, pulling him inside. "What are you doing here?" The years had been harder on Sarah than on Travis. At 32, grief had etched lines around her eyes, and her hair was streaked with premature gray. But the stubborn set of her jaw reminded him of their father. "Came to help," Travis said simply. "Heard about Daniel." "I'm sorry, Sarah." Her eyes welled with tears, but she blinked them back. "They're saying I'm a thief, Travis." "After Daniel died, questioning their safety practices." Travis sat at her kitchen table as Sarah explained. Daniel Mitchell had been a shift supervisor, repeatedly warning Western Silver about unsafe conditions in the new tunnel. The collapse had happened, exactly where he'd predicted. The company paid off Garrison to shut down any real investigation, Sarah continued. When I started asking questions, gathering statements from other miners, suddenly I'm being arrested for theft. Do you have proof? Of the safety warnings? Of Garrison's involvement? Sarah glanced toward the window. Daniel kept records. Copies. Of his reports, names of miners who backed him up. She lowered her voice. And he had something else. Something about Garrison and the mine owner, James Wilson. She retrieved a wooden box from beneath the floorboard under her bed. Inside was a journal filled with Daniel's neat handwriting and a stack of documents detailing safety violations. The last page, Sarah said. Travis turned to it and froze. It was a detailed account of Sheriff Garrison and Wilson meeting with men Daniel didn't recognize men speaking Russian. According to his notes, they had discussed using the mine tunnels to store something they didn't want found. Daniel thought they might be using the closed tunnels for smuggling, Sarah explained. He followed Garrison one night, took these. She handed Travis 3 photographs, clearly taken from a distance. They showed Garrison and Wilson unloading crates from a truck into an abandoned mine shaft. One image captured a crate that had broken open, revealing weapons inside. He was killed 3 days. After taking these, Sarah whispered. It wasn't an accident, Travis. Before Travis could respond, a sharp knock at the front door made them both stiffen. Mike peered out the window. It's Rankin, he hissed, and he's not alone. The morning sun cast long shadows down Silver Creek's main street as Travis sat on the bench outside the general store. He'd spent the night planning with Sarah and Mike after narrowly avoiding the deputies by slipping out Sarah's back window. The photographs and journal were now secure copies hidden in 3 separate locations. If anything happened to any of them, the others would ensure the evidence survived. Sheriff Warren Garrison's daily routine was predictable, according to Mike. Every morning at 9, he walked from his office to the Silver Spoon Cafe for breakfast. Travis checked his pocket watch. 3 minutes. Right on schedule. Garrison appeared, walking with the confident stride of a man who owned the ground beneath his feet. At 50, he was still imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, his silver-streaked hair visible beneath his hat. The badge on his chest caught the sunlight. Travis stood, stepping directly into Garrison's path. The sheriff stopped, momentary surprise, giving way to a cold smile. Travis Blackwood. Heard you were back in town. Not a smart decision. Wanted to talk to you about my brother-in-law, Travis said evenly, and about what he found in those tunnels before you had him killed. Garrison's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. Careful, boy. That's dangerous talk. People on the street had begun to notice the confrontation. Miners heading to their shift change slowed their pace. Shopkeepers stepped onto porches. I have the photographs, Garrison, Travis continued, loud enough for others to hear. Daniel documented everything: the weapons, the meetings with Wilson, and those Russian buyers. Garrison moved with surprising speed for his size, grabbing Travis by the shirt and pushing him against a post. You're under arrest for slander and interfering with an ongoing investigation. Travis didn't resist. This was exactly what he'd wanted: a public scene, witnesses. Check his inside pocket, Travis called out to the gathering crowd. Ask him about the $50,000 he's carrying. Ask him why a sheriff in a mining town carries that kind of cash. Garrison's face flushed with rage. His hand moved to his gun, but he hesitated at the murmur that ran through the onlookers. Taking advantage of the moment, Travis continued, I have copies of everything Daniel found. If anything happens to me or my sister, it all goes to the federal marshals, the governor, and every newspaper in Colorado. A tense silence fell over the street. Garrison slowly released Travis, straightening his vest with forced composure. If this story of courage and truth is inspiring you, take a second to hit the like button and subscribe to No Filter America. Your support helps us share more true stories about ordinary people standing up against injustice, animatedly among themselves. But now I'm not the only one aiming at Garrison. By noon, word of the confrontation had spread through Silver Creek like wildfire. Miners exchanged whispers in the tunnels. Wives gathered on porches, discussing what they'd heard. And in his office, Sheriff Garrison made a telephone call to James Wilson, owner of Western Silver Company. The battle lines had been drawn. Miners' Hall stood on the edge of Silver Creek, a plain wooden structure built by the miners themselves decades ago. By sunset, it was packed beyond capacity. Men and women from every corner of the community pressed inside, miners still in their work clothes, shop owners, teachers, and ranchers from outlying areas who had heard the news. Travis stood at the front, beside Sarah and Mike. On a table before them lay the evidence: Daniel's journal, the photographs, and safety reports that had been ignored by Western Silver. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Travis began, his voice carrying through the hushed room. "I came back because my sister needed help. But what I found isn't just about Sarah or Daniel. It's about all of you." He held up one of the photographs. Sheriff Garrison and James Wilson aren't just cutting corners on safety. They're using the abandoned tunnels for weapons smuggling, working with foreign buyers, right under our noses. A murmur ran through the crowd. Travis continued, explaining how Daniel had documented unsafe conditions, how his warnings had been ignored, and how 12 men had died needlessly. "My husband knew the risks of speaking up," Sarah added, her voice steady despite her grief. "But he believed the truth would protect others." Near the back of the hall, Jacob Reeves, a shift foreman at the mine, stood up. "I worked with Daniel. He showed me those same fault lines in Tunnel 6. When I backed his report, Wilson threatened my job." Others began to speak: a miner who'd been fired for questioning ventilation standards, a widow who'd been pressured to accept minimal compensation, a store clerk who'd seen Garrison and Wilson's late-night meetings. "They've been squeezing this town for years," an older miner named Howard Peterson declared, "cutting our pay while raising prices at the company store, making us work in tunnels they know ain't safe." The mood in the hall grew increasingly heated. Some called for immediate action: a strike, a march on the sheriff's office. Travis raised his hands for quiet. "We need to be smart about this. Garrison has deputies loyal to him. Wilson has hired guns. If we move too quickly, people will get hurt." "People are already getting hurt," someone shouted from the crowd. "My cousin lost his arm last month." "I understand," Travis replied, "but we need the law on our side. I've sent copies of everything to the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver. They should respond within days." "Days?" Peterson scoffed. "We could all be dead or jailed by then." Sarah stepped forward. "My husband believed in doing things the right way. He wouldn't want violence." The hall fell silent at her words. Then Jacob Reeves spoke again, his voice somber. "There's more than one way to fight. We don't have to wait for marshals from Denver. Every miner in this room can refuse to go down tomorrow. A strike." The word rippled through the crowd. "Wilson can't run those mines without us," another miner called. "Hit him where it hurts, his pocketbook." Travis exchanged glances with Sarah. This was moving faster than they'd planned. "If you strike," Travis cautioned, "there will be consequences. Wilson and Garrison won't back down easily." "Neither will we," Peterson declared, to murmurs of agreement. As they debated, the door at the back of the hall burst open. Deputy Rankin entered, flanked by 4 armed men who weren't wearing badges. "This is an illegal gathering. Rankin announced, hand on his holster. "Sheriff's orders. Disperse immediately." No one moved. The hall remained packed, miners and townspeople standing shoulder to shoulder, creating an impenetrable wall between the deputies and Travis. "You heard me," Rankin repeated, more uncertainty in his voice now. "This meeting is over." Howard Peterson stepped forward, his weathered face set in determination. "This is Miners' Hall, built with our own hands on land, deeded to the Miners Association in 1882. We have every right to gather here." "You're interfering with a criminal investigation," Rankin insisted. "Blackwood is wanted for questioning." Jacob Reeves joined Peterson. "There are over 100 witnesses here. You want to arrest all of us?" Rankin's eyes darted around the room, taking in the hostile faces. The men beside him shifted uncomfortably, outnumbered and surrounded. Travis moved to the front of the crowd. "I'll come answer your questions, Rankin. No need for trouble." Sarah grabbed his arm. "Travis, no." He squeezed her hand reassuringly. "It's all right. These people are with us now." As Travis approached Rankin, something unexpected happened. Miners moved with him, forming a protective circle. Women and older men joined them, until Travis stood at the center of a human shield. "He's not going anywhere," Peterson declared. "Not until the federal marshals arrive." Rankin's face flushed with anger. "You're making a mistake." "All of you?" "The only mistake was letting Garrison and Wilson run this town into the ground," a woman's voice called from the crowd. It was Martha Collins, who'd lost her husband in the mine collapse. "We've buried enough good men." Faced with overwhelming opposition, Rankin retreated, but not before issuing a final warning. "Sheriff Garrison will hear about this. There'll be consequences." After the deputies left, the hall erupted in urgent discussion. The confrontation had forced their hand. No one could return to normal. Now, not the miners who had openly defied Rankin, not the shopkeepers who had witnessed everything, not Travis, who had become the focal point of their resistance. Jacob Reeves climbed onto a chair. "I say we strike starting tomorrow. No one goes down into those mines until Wilson agrees to independent safety inspections and Garrison is removed as sheriff." The vote was nearly unanimous. By midnight, messengers had been sent to outlying mining camps to spread the word. Committees formed to organize food distribution, security patrols, and communication with the outside world. As the meeting dispersed, Travis pulled Sarah and Mike aside. "This is moving too fast. These people aren't prepared for what Wilson and Garrison might do." "Maybe not," Sarah replied, "but they're finally standing up. That's what Daniel wanted." Mike nodded toward the departing miners. "Look at them, Travis. I haven't seen this town so united in years." "Unity won't stop bullets," Travis said grimly. "We need to prepare for tomorrow." Dawn broke cold and clear over Silver Creek. Travis watched from Sarah's porch as miners gathered at the crossroads instead of reporting to the mine. By 6 o'clock, over 100 men stood in the early morning light, their breath fogging in the crisp air. Word had spread overnight. Miners from the northern tunnels, who hadn't attended the meeting, arrived in groups of 10 and 20. Wives and children joined them, carrying baskets of food and thermoses of coffee. Travis and Sarah walked to meet them, accompanied by Mike and several others who had helped organize the gathering. The crowd parted to let them through, faces both anxious and determined. Jacob Reeves approached with a list in his hand. 216, he reported. "That's every miner on Western Silver's payroll, except for Wilson's foreman and a few others." "What about the other shifts?" Travis asked. "Night shift joined us when they came up at midnight. Afternoon shift never went down yesterday after our meeting." Travis surveyed the crowd. They were ordinary people who had never planned to become. Rebels, men with calloused hands and tired eyes. Women who had spent years worrying each time their husbands descended into the earth. Now they looked to him, waiting. "We need to establish our demands clearly," Travis told the assembled leaders. "Safety inspections, fair wages, an investigation into the collapse and removal of Sheriff Garrison." Peterson added, "and recognition of our right to organize." Travis nodded. "Wilson will be expecting this. He'll have brought in extra men overnight." As if on cue, a convoy of automobiles appeared on the road from the Western Silver office. 4 vehicles pulled up, and James Wilson himself stepped out of the lead car. A tall, lean man in an expensive coat, his silver hair meticulously combed despite the early hour. Sheriff Garrison, conscious of the armed men watching his every move. "We have evidence of your weapons smuggling operation. Evidence that's already on its way to federal authorities." Wilson's composure slipped for just a moment, a flash of alarm in his eyes before his mask of confidence returned. Ridiculous accusations from a drifter and a grieving widow. "No one will believe you." 200 miners believe us, Sarah said, joining her brother. "And they've seen the evidence themselves." Garrison's hand moved to his gun, but Wilson placed a restraining hand on his arm. The mine owner studied the crowd, calculating. "Let's discuss this reasonably," Wilson said, his tone suddenly conciliatory. "I'm sure we can address any legitimate concerns about safety." "We're past discussions," Howard Peterson declared. "We have demands." As Peterson listed their terms, Travis noticed one of Wilson's men slipping away from the group, moving toward the back of the crowd. A moment later, he spotted another, doing the same on the opposite side. They were being surrounded. Travis caught Mike's eye and nodded slightly toward the men. Mike understood immediately, whispering to miners nearby, who began to shift position, ensuring women and children were protected at the center of the group. Wilson was still talking, making vague promises of improved conditions and a review of safety protocols. But Travis could see the tension in Garrison's posture, the way the hired guns were spreading out strategically. They were stalling, waiting for something or someone. A shout from the edge of the crowd confirmed Travis's suspicions. More of Wilson's men were approaching from behind, carrying clubs and lengths of chain. "It's a trap," Travis called out. "Everyone stay together." The peaceful standoff was about to become something far more dangerous. As the miners closed ranks, Travis stepped forward to face Wilson and Garrison, placing himself between them and the crowd. "Whatever you're planning," he said quietly, so only they could hear, "remember that every act of violence will be another piece of evidence against you." Another reason for those federal marshals to take a very close look at Silver Creek. Wilson's smile was cold. "Marshals take time to arrive, Blackwood. A lot can happen in a mining town before the law shows up." Behind Travis, 200 miners and their families waited, watching the confrontation unfold. The next few moments would determine whether their stand for justice would succeed or end in bloodshed. The standoff had reached its breaking point. Wilson's men were closing in from all sides. Garrison's hand rested on his holster, and the miners had formed a protective circle around their families. The air was thick with tension, like the moments before Adamite blast underground. Then came the unexpected, the sound of horses and wagons approaching from the direction of town. Everyone turned to see a procession heading their way. At the lead was Judge William Harmon, a respected figure who had served Silver Creek for over 20 years. Behind him rode several prominent business owners and ranchers from the surrounding area, including some who had never taken sides in mining disputes before. "What's the meaning of this, Wilson?" Judge Harmon called as he dismounted. His voice carried the authority of his position, despite his 70 years. Wilson's confident demeanor faltered slightly. "A labor dispute, Judge. Nothing that concerns the court. When armed men surround citizens on a public road, it becomes my concern," Harmon replied. He surveyed the scene, the miners with their families, Wilson's hired guns, the sheriff's deputies, especially when half the town is involved. Travis recognized an opportunity. Judge Harmon, we have evidence of criminal activity involving Sheriff Garrison and Mr. Wilson. Evidence that directly relates to the mine collapse that killed 12 men. Baseless accusations, Wilson snapped. Judge Harmon raised a hand for silence. I received a troubling telegram from the U.S. Marshal's office in Denver this morning. They're dispatching agents to investigate claims of weapons, smuggling, and corruption in Silver Creek. Garrison stepped forward. With all due respect, Judge, law enforcement in this town falls under my jurisdiction. Not when you yourself are under investigation, Sheriff, Harmon replied. The telegram specifically mentioned your name. A murmur ran through the crowd. Travis exchanged a glance with Sarah. Their messages had gotten through faster than expected. Judge Harmon turned to address the miners. I understand you have grievances. As a neutral party, I offer the courthouse as a place to present your evidence and demands. Mr. Wilson and Sheriff Garrison will attend, as will I and these witnesses. From town. He gestured to the business owners who had accompanied him. We're not dispersing, Howard Peterson declared. Last time we trusted the authorities, 12 men died. No one's asking you to disperse, Harmon assured him. I'm asking for representatives to present your case formally. The rest can remain here, peacefully assembled. Jacob Reeves looked to Travis, who nodded slightly. It was their best option. 5 representatives, Reeves countered, including Travis Blackwood and Sarah Mitchell. Judge Harmon agreed. In 1 hour at the courthouse. Wilson began to protest, but the judge cut him off. This isn't a request. Mr. Wilson, unless you prefer to explain your actions to federal marshals without having heard the miners' evidence first. Faced with the judge's authority and the unexpected public support for the miners, Wilson had little choice. He signaled his men to stand down, though his expression promised this wasn't over. As the tension eased, Travis approached Sarah. This is our chance. But it's also a risk. We'll be separated from the main group. Judge Harmon is fair, Sarah replied. He and Daniel respected each other. It's not the judge I'm worried about, Travis said, watching Wilson and Garrison conferring quietly by their vehicles. The miners selected their representatives, Travis, Sarah, Jacob Reeves, Howard Peterson, and Martha Collins, whose eloquence and status as a widow of the collapse gave moral weight to their cause. As they prepared to follow Judge Harmon to town, the remaining miners reorganized themselves. Some returned home to retrieve supplies for what might become a prolonged standoff. Others established a camp right there on the public road, a visible reminder of their resolve. Before leaving, Travis addressed them one last time. Whatever happens in that courthouse, don't give up. Don't let them divide you. Mike stepped forward. We'll be ready if anything goes wrong. Travis nodded gratefully. As he turned to go, a surprising thing happened. The miners removed their caps as he passed, a gesture of respect typically reserved for foremen or company officials. One by one, they reached out to touch his shoulder or shake his hand. Bring us justice, Blackwood, someone called. The responsibility settled on Travis like a heavy coat as he joined the others in the judge's wagon. Behind them, 200. Miners and their families stood watching, their future hanging on what would happen in the next few hours. The sun climbed higher over Silver Creek, illuminating a town at the crossroads of its own history. The Silver Creek courthouse was packed beyond capacity. Judge Harmon had insisted the proceedings be public, and townspeople crowded the benches while others stood along the walls. Sheriff Garrison sat with his deputies on one side, James Wilson and his lawyers on the other. At a table in the center, Travis and the miners' representatives arranged their evidence. This is an informal hearing, Judge Harmon announced, to address serious allegations concerning the operations of Western Silver Company and the conduct of county officials. All parties will have an opportunity to speak. For the next hour, Travis and Sarah presented their case methodically. They showed Daniel's safety reports with their ignored warnings. They presented testimonies from miners about dangerous conditions. Martha Collins spoke movingly about losing her husband and the company's callous response. Then came the photographs and journal entries documenting the weapons smuggling operation. These men are approaching the miners' families at the camp. The courthouse erupted in concerned murmurs. Judge Harmon banged his gavel for order. "Sheriff," the judge demanded, "is this your doing?" Garrison feigned surprise, but his expression betrayed. Him, Wilson remained stone-faced. "If harm comes to those people," Judge Harmon warned, "I will hold everyone in this room accountable." Travis didn't wait for further discussion. "We need to go, now." As they rushed toward the door, the sound of distant gunfire reached them. A single shot, then several more. What they found at the mining camp would forever change Silver Creek. Wilson's men had attempted to forcibly disperse the miners, firing warning shots to frighten them. But instead of scattering, the miners had stood their ground. Women and children formed a line behind the men, who armed themselves with tools and rocks. The standoff had reached a critical moment when an unexpected ally appeared: Clyde Bennett, Wilson's chief foreman, leading a group of workers who had previously stayed loyal to the company. "No more," Bennett had declared, joining the strikers. "I've watched good men die for Wilson's profits. It ends today." When Travis and the others from the courthouse arrived, they found Wilson's hired guns retreating, outnumbered and unwilling to massacre an entire community for a paycheck. As news of the confrontation spread, more townspeople arrived to stand with the miners. By sunset, over 500 people had gathered, nearly the entire population of Silver Creek. Judge Harmon, having witnessed everything, made an unprecedented decision. He sworn in 10 respected citizens as temporary deputies and ordered the arrest of Sheriff Garrison on charges of corruption and conspiracy. Wilson, seeing the tide turn decisively against him, attempted to flee but was detained at the edge of town by miners who had anticipated his escape. 3 days later, U.S. Marshals arrived from Denver. They brought with them arrest warrants, not just for Wilson and Garrison, but for officials in 3 counties implicated in the weapons smuggling network that Daniel Mitchell had uncovered. In the aftermath, Silver Creek began to rebuild. Mines remained closed for 2 weeks while independent inspectors assessed the safety conditions. When work resumed, it was under new management and with significantly improved practices. 1 month after Travis had ridden into town, the miners gathered again at Miners Hall. This time, they came not in protest, but in celebration, and to make a decision about their future. "We need leadership," Jacob Reeves announced to the assembled workers. "Someone who understands both the mines and the law. Someone who stood with us when it mattered." Howard Peterson stepped forward, holding an old miner's helmet polished to a shine. It had belonged to the first mine foreman in Silver Creek, decades ago, and had become a symbol of authority earned through respect rather than imposed by wealth or title. "Travis Blackwood," Peterson called, "the miners of Silver Creek ask you to accept this token and the responsibility that comes with it, not as our boss, but as our representative to the new mining council." Travis hadn't planned to stay in Silver Creek. He'd come only to help his sister, intending to return to his wandering life once justice was served. But looking at the faces around him, people who had risked everything to stand against corruption, he recognized something he'd been searching for in his years of drifting: purpose and community. Sarah stood beside him, no longer weighed down by grief and injustice. "Daniel would be proud," she whispered, "of all of us." Travis accepted the helmet, to thunderous applause. "I'm no leader," he said once the noise had subsided, "but I'll stand with you as long as you'll have me." The cowboy who took down a corrupt sheriff, someone called from the back. Sounds like a leader to me. As autumn settled over the mountains, Silver Creek began a new chapter. The mines operated safely under the watchful eye of the Miners' Council. The new sheriff elected in a special vote was a former miner himself who understood the community's needs. And Travis Blackwood, who had never sought power or position, found himself exactly where he needed to be. Some evenings he would ride his dun gelding up to the ridge overlooking the town, watching the lights come on in homes where families no longer lived in fear. Change had come to Silver Creek, not through the barrel of a gun or the weight of wealth, but through the courage of ordinary people who decided justice was worth fighting for. And that, Travis reflected as the mountain wind ruffled his horse's mane, was a story worth being part of. And now, we'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think gave those 200 miners the courage to follow him? Share your ideas in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video, subscribe to No Filter America, and help us keep these powerful stories alive.